Today we're sewing a combination binding style of a basic double needle Coptic binding and cross stitch. Here are the supplies that you'll need. You'll need 2 book covers and an even number of signatures. Today I have 6 signatures, and this is just scrap paper for practice. This binding is sewn in 2 different parts. For the double needle Coptic stitch, I prefer curved needles. You'll need at least 4 curved needles. For the second part, the cross stitch part, you might find that you enjoy a straight needle. You'll also need 1 or more colors of thread, a ruler, scissors, something to write with, like a pencil. Beeswax is optional but helpful. Scrap paper, something to poke holes on, just a few pieces of scrap cardboard right there, and something to poke holes with. I also have a cutting mat, and that is very helpful. I find it easiest to create a template to plan out this combination binding. It saves frustration, time, and helps you get an idea of the completed design before you ever begin to sew. Measure the length of the spine of your book, then cut or tear your scrap paper to this size. Before marking your template, there's a couple things to consider. For smaller books such as this one, I like to go with a section of double needle Coptic stitch at each end of the spine. For a larger book, like this one, I like to sew another section of double needle Coptic stitch right in the middle to give the book extra security. It's just up to you and what you like. To make measuring more easy, I like to plan from the outside edge of the cover towards the middle, marking the holes closest to the edge first and then working my way towards the middle. For the holes closest to the edge, I mark 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch from the cover edge. I found that beyond 1/2 inch, it seems the book becomes a little bit more wiggly. It's time to decide the spacing of the second hole of each section of double needle Coptic stitch. For this book, I'm going with 5/8 of an inch. You'll want to adjust your measurements according to the size of your book and what you like. 1/2 inch up to 1.5 inch also works. Now that we have our sections of double needle Coptic stitch planned, it's time to plan out the cross stitch area. Divide the middle area into however many rows of cross stitch that you'd like. Try different measurements to see how big you'd like the X's to be. The smallest measurement I've sewn so far is 3/8 of an inch, about 1 centimeter. It's also my favorite spacing for the cross stitch pattern. To test out the spacing, I usually draw X's on my template to represent the rows of cross stitch. I've found with smaller spacing, you have to be very careful not to rip through the holes as you sew. Larger spacing works too. It just gives the binding a different look. We'll need to plan out how far into the cover to punch our holes. So I'm using my ruler and my cutting mat to do this. You'll take that first cover and marking about 1/2 inch in from the edge of the spine at the top of the cover towards the middle. And repeating this step at the bottom part of the cover. I like to lay the template along the marks and mark each hole for each section a double needle Coptic stitch. I do not mark the holes for the cross stitch area. For this book, we will only be punching holes in each cover for the sections of double needle Coptic stitch. However, you could also attach the covers with cross stitch if you want to. The sewing process then becomes a little different and a little bit more confusing on video, so I kept it as simple as I could today. But if you're interested in a future tutorial showing this process as well, let me know in the comments. Go ahead and punch holes in your first cover. The method I like to go with is to punch the holes mostly through to the outside, just enough to see the tip of the awl poke through. Then I flip the cover over and then punch the hole back towards the inside of the cover. This seems to keep the outside of the book from having a little molehill pop up. It's really up to you. Take the second cover and lay it down. Take the cover you just punched holes in and lay it over the top. Line them up and hold them tightly and mark the holes with the pencil or your awl. I just use my awl and just punch through enough to get a mark in the second cover. Then I set the first cover aside and go ahead and punch the holes on the second cover. If there's an area of the cover that popped up when you punch the hole, you can take the opposite end of the awl or a bone folder or another smooth object and just press it down, and that should get rid of that. If you bind books a while, you'll come up with your favorite way to mark signatures and punch or saw the holes. It's part of the fun of the process. Take the template and line it up along a signature. Mark each hole, both for the sections of double needle Coptic stitch and for cross stitch. Then I like to go ahead and mark the top of the signature. This helps me stay organized and make sure they're all lined up when they get into a stack. Go ahead and mark the rest of your signatures. I like to use the first signature to mark the rest, but you could easily just use the template. Then I line up the signatures to double check the marks are in line. Once I have all the signatures marked, I punch the holes. And I like to punch each signature separately, laying it face down, but you could easily use a book cradle. You can also clamp and saw the signatures all together or use a craft knife. It's just personal preference. For me, I find that one at a time gives me less anxiety and just helps me enjoy the process more. It's time to start sewing our double needle Coptic stitch. Let's prepare our thread. Since double needle Coptic stitch is sewn in paired stations, you'll need one longer length of thread, or if using two colors, two shorter lengths of thread. When sewing one color of thread, I measure about 2 arm lengths. With 2 colors, I measure 1 arm length per thread. This usually is more than enough thread to get through the book. If using beeswax, go ahead and wax your thread. Hold the beeswax, place your thread over the top, and then your thumb over the top of the thread. Then pull the thread through as many times as you like. Usually, I pull the thread through about 3 to 4 times. If using 2 different colors of thread, you'll take a thread of each color and knot the ends together. And I repeat this step for each pair of threads. I just make a loop around my finger, pull the end of the thread through the loop, and then tighten it up. Next, to add a needle on the end of each thread, and I prefer curved needles, but straight needles work as well. Then decide if you'd like to begin sewing from the front of the book or the back. Either way is fine. Today I'm sewing from the front of the book. Start with your cover and first signature. Take your signature and open it up to the inside. Take that first needle of that pair of threads and go through the first hole from the inside of the signature to the outside. Pull the thread all the way through. And repeat this for the second half of that thread or pair of threads. So you'll take that second needle, go through the second hole from the inside of the signature to the outside, and pull the thread all the way through. Then center the thread so that it's an even measurement coming out of each hole. Or if you have knotted your threads together like I have, just place the knot in the middle. Repeat these same steps for each section of double needle Coptic stitch. So if you have a book with one section in the middle, then keep on going. My book only has another section at the very tail end, so that's what I'm doing. I'm opening up the signature, taking that first thread, that first needle, going through that first hole, pulling the thread all the way through, then repeating that for the second needle on that pair of threads. Just make sure that you have an equal amount of thread coming out each holes. And if you have knotted your thread together, just place the knot in the middle. It's time to attach our cover. I take the signature and just place it over the cover, and then I just stagger them a little bit so that you can see the inside of your cover. It makes it a lot easier to work with. You'll take that first thread, that first needle, and you'll wrap it around the outside edge of the cover and then go up through the hole from the outside of the cover to the inside and pull that thread through, keeping the thread to the inside of the pair of stations. So that thread will be in between those two holes. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. Keeping that thread to the inside of the pair of stations. So you'll have that loop, and then as you wrap around, that loop will be to the outside edge of your book, but the thread, the loose thread, will be between those two holes of paired stations. You'll repeat the same step for the second thread on the second hole. So you'll wrap that thread around the edge of the cover and back through the outside of the cover to the inside. Pull your needle and thread all the way through while keeping the thread to the inside of the pair of stations. So the loops will be on the outside of the pair and the loose threads will be on the inside. Then go ahead and move on to the next pair of stations and do the same step. So take that first thread, that first needle, wrap it around the edge of the cover, go up through the outside of the cover, and then pull the thread all the way through to the inside, staying between the signature and the cover. And as you pull it through, make sure that the thread remains on the inside of that pair of stations. So the loops on the outside, loose threads on the inside. Repeat the same step on the next thread. So you'll take that last thread, you'll wrap it around the outside edge of your cover. From the outside, go through to the inside, pull the thread all the way through, keeping the thread to the inside of the pair of stations. You can double check to make sure the thread is not twisty around the cover, and then go back and tighten everything up. And how you do that is just place the cover and the signature together, and then with one hand hold it down and the other hand just kind of pull the thread and it should tighten up. There you go. Next, it's time to secure the cover more. So we're taking that first thread, that first needle, and wrapping from the outside to the inside around the thread that connects the cover and the signature, and then pull the thread all the way through. It's making a little loop around that thread, and you can wiggle it a little bit to tighten it up. You can open up the book to double check that you did not catch the thread just wrapping the cover, and then move on to the second thread. Take that second thread and go from the outside to the inside around the thread that connects the signature and the cover. Loop it around and then wiggle it to tighten it up. Both threads should be between the pairs of stations, so you've wrapped from the outside to the inside. Go ahead and repeat the same steps for the next pair of stations. So you're always wrapping from the outside to the inside around the thread that comes out of the signature and wraps around the cover. The dangling threads will hang between the paired stations. And then you can open up the book to double check that you did not catch the threads on the cover. You may want to go back and just kind of wiggle the thread a little bit to tighten these up. If you're having a hard time seeing the colors of these threads, check out this video. It's Double Needle Coptic Stitch with no additional binding, but the colors are opposite colors, so it might make it easier to see. Go ahead and grab your second signature. If you have a beanbag or other weight that you can place on your book, it's very helpful. I'm holding the book in my hand, but you may find it easier to sew this directly on your table. Take your first thread, your first needle, go through the first hole of that signature, pull your needle all the way through, and then go out the second hole and pull your thread all the way. Then take your second needle, second thread of that pair, go through the second hole, from the outside to the inside, Pull your thread all the way through, then back out that first hole. You should have 2 threads running along the inside of your signature. Then go on to the next pair of stations. Take the first thread, first needle, go from the outside to the inside of the signature, pull your thread all the way through, then go out the next hole. Pull the thread all the way through. Repeat the same step for the next thread. Go in the next hole of the signature, pull your thread all the way through, then back out that first hole of the pair of stations. Try not to catch the other thread with your needle. If you need to, you can push the other thread over to the side a little bit. Just take your time. It takes a little practice, but you'll get it. Once you have the thread through, go ahead and tighten it up if you like, just by holding the book down and taking your other hand and just kind of pulling on the threads. There you go. That's what it looks like. It's time to link that second signature to the first. So what we're doing, we're dropping down only one signature and looping around the thread that connects the first signature in the cover. As you loop around from the outside to the inside, you'll pull the thread until you get a little loop. Once you have that little loop, you'll take your thread and go up through the loop and pull it tight to create a kettle stitch. Then we'll take our second thread of that pair of stations and we'll drop down between the cover and the first signature and loop from the outside to the inside of that pair of stations. Pull your thread until you have a little loop. And then you'll go up through the loop to create a kettle stitch. If you've never sewn this before and it gets confusing, you can just do a link. The kettle stitch does lock in your signatures, but it's not an absolute necessity. And then we'll just move on to the next pair of stations. So you'll take that first thread, that first needle, drop down and loop from the outside to the inside between the cover and that first signature. Pull your thread until you have a little loop. And then take your needle and go up through the loop and pull it tight. Repeat the same step for the next thread of that pair of stations, dropping down between the cover and that first signature, looping from the outside to the inside, pulling the thread till you have a little loop, and then going up through the loop to create a kettle stitch. For a more detailed video showing you how to do the kettle stitch, check out the link above. The beauty of the kettle stitch is that it locks in your signatures, and if you drop the book or it wiggles around, your signatures are not going anywhere. They are locked in. It's time for the third signature. Place it over the top and take that first thread, first needle, and go up through the first hole. Pull your thread all the way through, and then go out the second hole of that pair of stations. Repeat the same step for the second thread, second needle. Go up through that second hole, pull your thread all the way through, and then back outside that first hole of the pair of stations. Move on to the next pair of stations and take that first thread, that first needle, go through that first hole, pull your thread all the way through, and then go back out that next hole. And the step repeats for that second thread of that pair of stations. go up through the second hole, pull your thread all the way through, and then back out the first. You can go ahead and tighten up your book if you like. That's what it should look like. This time we're going to link one signature down between the first and the second signatures. So we've moved up one, right? So you're going down, you're taking that first thread, that first needle, looping down from the outside to the inside around the thread that connects the first and second signatures. Make your little loop, go up through the loop and pull it tight. Repeat the same step for the second thread of that pair of stations. Go loop down from the outside to the inside between the first and second signature. Make your little loop and then go up through the loop and pull it tight. Repeat the same step for the next pair of stations. Take that first thread, that first needle, loop it down from the outside to the inside between the first and second signature. Pull the thread until you have a little loop, and then go up through the loop and pull it tight. Repeat the same step for the last thread of that pair of stations. Drop down between the first and second signature, looping from the outside to the inside. Create a little loop and then go up through the loop to create your kettle stitch. I'm going to sit here and walk through the entire thing with you. Feel free to jump ahead if you like. We're going to take that fourth signature and stack it over the top. Take that first thread, that first needle, go through the first hole, pull the thread all the way through, and then go out the second hole. Once you get a rhythm of this, it actually is very simple. And you're always linking one below when it's time to link. So you kind of get in this flow. Take that second thread, that second needle, and go up through that second hole. Pull your thread all the way through. Sometimes it gets stuck a little bit, so I just wiggle it, and then go out that first hole. Repeat these same steps for the next pair of stations. Take that first thread, that first needle, go through the first hole, pull your thread all the way through, and then back out that next hole. Usually I like to hold the other thread away as I push the needle through, and it kind of helps it a little bit. Take that second thread, that second needle, go up through the second hole, pull the thread all the way through, and then back out the first hole. If you do catch the thread, it's not the end of the world. It does make it a little bit harder to tighten up the book if you need to, but you can take that needle and go to the outside of your signature and kind of push that other thread out of the way. And then when you go back to the inside to pull the needle through like normal, usually the thread is out of the way. If you do catch it, it's not the end of the world. When it comes to linking, once you get in the middle of the book and you're, past the cover in that first signature, you're always just going to drop down to the outside and just link one below from the outside to the inside, make the little loop, and then go up through the loop for the kettle stitch. And you repeat this until you get to the very last signature of the book. Repeating the same step for the second thread of that pair of stations, dropping down one signature below from the outside to the inside, looping around, and then making that little loop and then going up through the loop to create a kettle stitch. So you just kind of get like in this rhythm, and it's really wonderful. Repeating the same step for the next pair of stations, always looping down one signature below from the outside to the inside, making a little loop, and then going up through the loop. Because on the pair of stations, you're always looping from the outside to the inside. You're working in opposite directions. So if it gets confusing, kind of consider them as their own little unit. All right, let's take that fifth signature and place it over the top. The process with the fifth signature is exactly the same. So first needle, pulling it through the hole, going to the inside, pulling it back out the outside, and then repeating the same step for the next thread of that pair of stations. And I'm just repeating that same step with the second thread of that pair of stations, taking that thread, going up through the middle of the signature, and going back out the first hole, pulling it all the way through. And then moving on to the next pair of stations. Sometimes the little pages, they kind of shift around as I'm holding it, and so I'll take that needle and go to the outside real quick and use the needle to help line up my pages. And then I can go back and push the needle all the way through. I like to hold that thread to the side as I push the needle through that second hole, and it kind of helps keep things out of the way. Every book is like an adventure, so even if you've bound books for a while, you'll still come up with little things that you do like, oh my gosh, I caught my needle again, and it's frustrating, so you have to kind of set the bean back down and go walk away for a second and then come back to it, and I'm like ready to go again. Once again, we're dropping down one signature below from the outside to the inside, pulling the thread all the way through until you get a little loop and then going up through the loop. Now, I'll tell you a secret. If you do that kettle stitch enough, you'll develop a way to do it all in one movement. I'm holding the thread out to the side like this. There you go. That actually makes one big loop. Look at this. I can do the kettle stitch all in one movement. So I have my loop and I'm going to pull it through. Lost my needle, but I'm pulling it through, and look, one movement. I didn't have to stop to make a little loop. See, there's the little loop. I'm already through it. Bam, done. When you're working opposite your dominant hand, it's a little bit more tricky, but I'm going to try to show you this again. So I'm going to use my left hand. I'm right-handed, so looping down one signature below. There's my loop. It's just massive. I take that thread, place it over the top, and then pull that thread through, and bam, kettle stitch. Once you get the hang of it and it clicks, you're like, oh, this is a lot easier than I thought it was. But until then, sometimes it's a struggle. So always feel free to leave out the kettle stitch if you like and rock on. We're down to the last signature. Taking that thread, and we're going to go to the inside of the book and then back to the outside. And I'm going to repeat the same process for the next thread, going through that second hole to the inside of the signature and then back out the first. And repeat these same steps for the next pair of stations. First thread, going through that first hole, pulling it all the way through, and then back out the second. And then repeating the same step for the next thread. The process is the same for this signature as well. Drop down one signature below, loop from the outside to the inside, create your little loop, and then go up through the loop to create your kettle stitch. And repeat this step for the next thread of that pair of stations. So you're dropping down one signature below, you're looping from the outside to the inside, pulling the thread until you have a little loop, and then going up through the loop to create your kettle stitch. Then move on to the next pair of stations and repeat the same steps, dropping down one signature below, linking from the outside to the inside, pulling your thread till you have a little loop, and then going up through the loop to create your kettle stitch. And repeat the same step for the next thread of that pair of stations. This time I'm just doing it in one movement. Okay, and now I realize that we have a slight dilemma. So when I had the book and I add the cover, the threads are a different color. What I need to do is get that first color thread back to the second hole, and the second color back to the first. I've already done the kettle stitch, so I take that thread and just go right back into the signature. Yes, you will have 4 threads on the inside of this signature. The reason is because we're switching our threads back up. So if this step is confusing or the threads are catching themselves and you just don't want to do it, what you can do is just fast forward just a little bit until I have my threads switched, and then you can rock on and everything's the same. I'm just switching my colors to get the original color back out where it needs to be. And I'm just repeating the same step for the next pair of stations. To switch my colors, I'm taking that first thread and going back into that last signature, back out to that last hole. Remember, this step is not necessary if you don't want to switch your threads back. Taking that last thread and going out that last hole. Remember, I've already linked down below and done a kettle stitch, so everything is nice and secure. I'm just swapping my threads. We're back out with the correct colors on the outside, and if you didn't switch your threads, you'll start here as well. Take your second cover, lay it atop your book, take that first thread, that first needle, go from the outside of the cover through that first hole, pull the thread all the way through and around. The thread that is hanging should be on the outside of that loop, just like that. And then you'll take the second thread, second needle, go through the outside of the cover to the inside, pull the thread all the way. Sometimes it gets a little stuck. And loop around, keeping the thread to the outside of the pair of stations. If the thread gets a little twisty, just take a little moment and untwist it. Don't worry about tightening it up too much yet, because we still have to attach the other threads. Go on to the next pair of stations. Take that first thread, that first needle, go from the outside of the cover to the inside, and then loop it between the cover and the last signature. It's going to want to snag the book. Just take your time and pull it through, keeping the hanging thread to the outside of the pair of stations. Mine got a little twisted, so I'm taking a moment to fix it. Then take that last thread of the pair of stations, go from the outside to the inside of your cover, and then back between the cover and the last signature. It's time to lock in the cover. Take the first thread, first needle, wrap it from the inside to the outside around the thread that connects the cover to the last signature. Repeat the same step for the second thread of that pair of stations, wrapping from the inside to the outside around the thread that connects the cover to the signature. And that's what it looks like on the inside. Then you can hold the book down and tighten them up by just wiggling those threads. You could essentially go back inside the book right now and tie it off. But what I like to do is do one more little loop just to make sure the cover is extra secure. Take your thread and drop it down between the second and third to last signatures, and you're making a little loop. And you could totally leave the kettle stitch out. I guess I'm just on a roll with the kettle stitch today, so I'm making another kettle stitch and pulling it right through the loop, and repeating this for the next thread on that pair of stations. Take your second thread and go between the second and third to last signatures. Making the little loop. You could totally just link it if you like. I've done kettle stitches everywhere else, so I'm just continuing it on. And then I'm going to repeat this for the next set of paired stations and just work my way down the book. Looking back, I could have left the kettle stitch out and been perfectly fine with this, but it does add a little bit extra security. Once you have linked all your threads, we're just going to go back in that last signature and tie them off. You'll take that first thread, first needle, go back into that hole one more time in that last signature, and pull the thread all the way through. And go ahead and repeat this for each thread of the binding. Once all the threads are back to the inside, go ahead and tie them off in whatever knot you like. What I like to do is go left over right, and then right over left, and make a little square knot. But whatever knot you like to use is completely okay. It just needs to hold the book. And then you can decide, do you want to leave the length of the thread for a bookmark, or do you want to go ahead and cut them off? If you do decide to cut your threads, leave about an inch or so beyond the knot, just because if you cut too close to the knot, it might want to come undone. Now, looking at my template, I'm deciding that I really want to eliminate the row of cross stitch just directly next to the Coptic stitch on either side. So I'm just going ahead and erasing that. The beautiful thing is the holes match having those gaps. So if you're like me, want to change things up, you can still do that. It's really flexible. It's time to begin sewing the cross stitch. You'll need your book, thread of your choice. A straight needle works great for this. Beeswax is optional. Scissors. And then you may find those little clips very helpful. I've yet to find a simple way to give an exact measurement of how much thread you'll need for cross-stitching your book. I haven't yet. You're more than welcome to try, but make sure to factor in all the little X's and back and forth. What I like to do is just keep it simple and pull out 2 arm lengths of thread. So 2 arm lengths is usually plenty of thread. And if your book is much larger, you may want a little bit more. However, if you go past 3 arm lengths, it does get more challenging just because the thread is so long. So just something to keep in mind. The next thing I do is I wax the thread. This is totally optional. And I just pull it through about 3 or 4 times. Just a reminder, you can start sewing your book from the first signature or the last. It really is up to you. I'm using little clips to help hold back the pages of the signatures. And then taking my needle and going into that first hole from the inside of the signature and pulling it all the way through until I have a little tail. You could knot this, but what happens, I found that oftentimes the knot wants to pull through, so here's a little trick. You can take a little clip and just pop it on the end of that thread, and that will help it keep from pulling through. I'm going diagonally down into the second signature, going from the outside to the inside and pulling the thread all the way. Go back out that first hole of the second signature. and pull the thread all the way out. Next, we're going to go down into the third signature. Place the needle into that second hole of the third signature and pull the thread all the way through. Now we'll go back out that first hole of the third signature. And then go down into the second hole of the fourth signature. Go back out the first hole of the fourth signature. Go into the second hole of the fifth signature. And back out the first hole of the fifth signature. All right, we are now to the sixth signature. So open up the book to the sixth signature. In this case, this is my last signature. And I'm going to go through the second hole of the sixth signature. Pulling my thread all the way to the inside. Go down to that third hole of the sixth signature. Go out the third hole and pull your needle all the way through. This time we'll be sewing back into the second hole of the fifth signature. We're making all the diagonals go in the same direction. And then you're going to go back out the third hole of the fifth signature. Then go back out the third hole of the fourth signature. And then take your needle and go in the second hole of the third signature. And then go out the third hole of the third signature. Go in the second hole of the second signature. As you work, be real careful not to catch the threads. You can use the needle to kind of push them to the side as you go. If you do happen to catch them, just be aware it does make it more difficult to tighten things up later. Then go out the third hole of the second signature. Take your needle and go into the second hole of the first signature and pull your thread all the way. Go out the third hole of the first signature. This time we're going into the fourth hole of the second signature. Place your needle through the fourth hole of the second signature and then go back out the third hole of the second signature. I got tongue twisted on that one. This process repeats again. Take your needle and go through the fourth hole of the third signature. And then go back out the third hole of that signature. We're just working our way down. And we're going to go into the fourth hole of the fourth signature. And then back out the third hole of that signature. Take your needle and go into the fourth hole of the fifth signature. Once you get into the rhythm, you'll notice that you go on even rows of cross stitch, you go one direction, and then on odd rows of cross stitch, you go the other. But the diagonals on the outside of the book stay the same. We're just working our way down the book. And then you'll go out the fifth hole of that signature. Working our way back up now, and we're going back into that fourth hole on the fifth signature. And then back out the fifth hole. Moving on to the next signature. And then back out the fifth hole of that signature. To the next signature and going in the fourth hole of that signature. And then back out the fifth hole. To the next signature and repeat the process, going in the fourth hole of that signature and then back out the fifth hole. I have one more signature to go, so opening up the book to my sixth signature, going out that fifth hole of the sixth signature, and then going down into the sixth hole of the fifth signature, then going back out the hole before. So in this case, we'll be going back out the fifth hole of the fifth signature. Remember, we're always working our way down diagonally. Then going back out the hole before of that same signature. Go down to the sixth hole of that signature. Then back out the previous hole of that signature. Take your needle and go through the sixth hole of that signature. Pull your thread all the way through. Go back out the fifth hole of that signature, the one hole right before. And we're just working our way back up and going into the sixth hole of the fifth signature, creating the other half of that X. And then I'll go out the previous hole, so the fifth hole on the fifth signature, pulling the thread all the way through, and we're back to the outside. Working our way up, take your needle and go into the sixth hole of the fourth signature. So we're just working our way up the signatures again. And then back out the fifth hole of the fourth signature. So you're always going back out the previous hole when you're working your way back up. And then crossing back into the sixth hole of the third signature. All right, and we go back out the previous hole. Going into the sixth hole of the second signature. And then back out the previous hole. Looking back, I probably should have made the covers a different color, but, you know, hindsight is 20/20. And then now on to the first signature, and taking my needle and going into the sixth hole of that first signature. And we're going back out the fifth hole of that signature, so we're going back a hole, the previous hole. Open up your book to the second signature, that's one signature below, and go into the fourth hole of the second signature. Then back out the 5th hole of that signature. Open up your book to the 3rd signature and go into the 4th hole of the 3rd signature. Then back out the 5th hole of that signature. Working our way back down, now onto the 4th signature. Go into the 4th hole of the 4th signature. Open your book to the 5th signature. Go into the 4th hole of the 5th signature. Pull your thread to the inside. Then back out the 5th hole of the 5th signature. Onto the 6th signature of your book. So open up your book and you're going to go take your thread and go into the 4th hole of the 6th signature. Go out the 3rd hole of the 6th signature. We're back out to the outside. It's time to work our way back up. Take your needle and go into the 4th hole of the 5th signature. You're probably starting to get into a rhythm by now. Go out the 3rd hole of the 5th signature and pull your thread through. You're back out to the outside. Open up your book to the 4th signature. Go into the 4th hole of the 4th signature. And then back out the 3rd hole of that signature. Flip to the 3rd signature of your book and take your needle and go into the 4th hole of the 3rd signature. And then back out the 3rd hole of that signature. Flip to the 2nd signature of your book. Take your needle and go into the 4th hole of the 2nd signature. And back out the 3rd hole of that same signature. So now we're at the 1st signature. Open up your book. Go into the 4th hole of the 1st signature. And then go out the 3rd hole of that signature. It's time to work our way back down. Flip to the 2nd signature of your book and go into the 2nd hole of the 2nd signature. And then go back out the 3rd hole of that signature. Flip to the 3rd signature of your book, so we're working our way back down, and go into the 2nd hole of the 3rd signature. Oop, I got myself a little bit. And then back out the 3rd hole of that signature. Flip to the 4th signature of your book. If you get kind of confused, you can always look at the side of your book as you work your way down. Go into the 2nd hole of the 4th signature. And then back out the 3rd hole of that signature. If you accidentally catch your thread, take a second and you can pull your thread back out if you need to and readjust. Just remember, if you catch your thread, it's not the end of the world, but it does kind of hinder you tightening up the threads at the very end. I'll take my needle and kind of readjust the threads. And it just takes a second, but usually it's worth it. Moving on to the 5th signature, and you're going through the 2nd hole of the 5th signature. And then back out the 3rd hole of that signature. And then flip to the 6th signature. So we're back down and we're going to go into the 2nd hole of that 6th signature and pull our thread to the inside. And then out the 1st hole of the signature. I can almost taste it. I know we're almost done. Here we go again, working our way back up. We're out that 1st hole of the 6th signature, opening to the 5th signature and going up into that 2nd hole of the 5th signature. And then back out that 1st hole. Flip to the 4th signature of your book. Go into the 2nd hole of the 4th signature. And then back out that 1st hole. Moving on to the 3rd signature of your book, and go into the 2nd hole of the 3rd signature. And then back out that 1st hole. Flip to the 2nd signature of your book. Go through the 2nd hole of the 2nd signature. And then back out that 1st hole of that signature. Flip to the 1st signature of your book. We'll take care of the clip in a second. Go into the 2nd hole of that 1st signature. Before you tie your threads off, do a quick check of your crosses to make sure you like how they look, and then tighten them up or adjust things as necessary and tie off your book. I just like to do a square knot, left over right and right over left, but really any knot you like is fine. If you choose to cut off your thread, remember to leave a little extra length just beyond the knot so that it doesn't want to pull out. And there you go. Congratulations, you did a combination binding of double needle Coptic and cross stitch. If you have questions or you enjoyed this tutorial, please let me know in the comments. If you're interested in adding Coptic headbands to your book, check out this next video.